So start off with looking at the membership information and membership updates. So we should have 2 new members join us this morning, but actually I can't see either of them on the screen at the moment.
I'm hoping Joe. I'm delighted that.
Oh, Joe, I can see Joe.
Yeah, Joe's just joined us. Joe Holmes, who's the head teacher at Malvern's Close Academy, Primary Academy, which is obviously part of the Wise Academies Trust. Following the appeal for members at the last meeting, there was Joe contacted me, expressed an interest, and I'm delighted she's able to get involved. So welcome, Joe. We also had an expression of interest in joining forum from James Wilson, who's the co-head teacher. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yes. From James Wilson, at the who's one of the two co-head teachers at Duchess Community High School, which is part of the Peel Trust. I'd hoped James was going to be joining this meeting, but doesn't appear to have made it yet.
Okay, well, welcome, Joe, and hopefully James may be able to join us before the meeting ends. Andrea, do we have any apologies for absence?
Chair, this is James is just joining now. James Wilson.
Oh, welcome, James.
And we have apologies.
Yeah,
we have apologies from Nicola Threlfall. That's it. We have no other apologies.
We still do have
Sorry, Bruce, you've frozen.
Chair, do you want to just give him a couple of minutes and see if it comes back on?
Yes, sorry, my sound's coming in and out as well with a few technical problems. I'm sure Bruce will probably come out and rejoin. So if we just move on, just a reminder in terms of disclosures of interest, if there are any, please make them in line with the items that are raised. So I think Bruce was going to say that we're still carrying 1 or 2 vacancies. So again, if you know anyone that might feel they might benefit professionally from participating in the schools forum, again, particularly for people that maybe perhaps recently become head teachers, it's really good experience learning about school funding and participating in some lively debates, particularly around high needs, which I'm sure will continue to dominate our agenda for the foreseeable future.
Sorry, Bruce, you're still on mute.
what happens when you're late in. Apologies about that. Hopefully I'm back with everybody now.
Yes, we can see and hear you again, Bruce.
Okay.
Okay, Bruce, so we were just about to go through the minutes and matters arising.
Okay. If I share my screen with the minutes of the last meeting, would that be helpful to members? Pick that up, just bear with me. Okay. Page 1 just deals with attendance. Page 2, any issues of accuracy or matters arising?
Yeah, on page 2, I think it's 25. There it says Graham Wilkins ... I think it should read be vice chair or something like that. Remain as vice chair.
It would be vice chair and chair of High Needs Committee. Apologies, Graham. Yeah.
All right, no problem. Thank you.
Item 27. It's the financial monitoring report. 28 was the SEN update. '29 was the general update in relation and the specific consultation about the 24-25 DSG. Okay.
Okay, with the amendment in relation to the missing part around Graham's role, everyone happy to agree the minutes is a true record and happy for me to sign on behalf of Schools Forum?
True record, Chair.
Thank you. Okay,
Okay.
moving on to the next item, which is communication, Bruce.
There is no specific issue, no specific papers in relation to communication to this immediate meeting. Members may have been aware that Formula 40 have been active again this week in relation to securing a debate in the House of Commons in relation to SEN and SEN funding. The February meeting will have more of an SEN focus as we set the detail of the high needs block and also bring some more information back from the around the SEN aspects of the school consultation, and we'll see if we can bring some information together as part of that meeting, Chair, if that's okay.
That's great, thank you. Okay, the substantive item this morning is around the setting of the dedicated schools grant. That there are a few items which within this, which Bruce is going to present, which Schools Forum are asked to note, but just there are a couple of specific points where we will be asking for agreement from those who represent the maintained schools only. So it excludes academies and free schools. So Bruce has also got a couple of slides just to elaborate on a couple of the areas. So it's over to you again, Bruce.
Okay, thanks, Chair. As I say, it was 19th of December with thanks to the ESFA, we got the settlement data through. You'll remember in terms of background, we've previously agreed a transfer of up to 0.5% from the schools block to the high needs block was agreed at the November meeting. And it also confirmed that we now mirror the national funding formula in all factors. When we've looked at the detail of the figures again, we also confirmed that the mainstream schools additional grant funding paid in the current financial year in 2023-24 has been consolidated in the DSG for 24-25. Our 24-25 basic schools block figure is some 1.43% higher, £3 million. So in the context of the uplift, it isn't significant. There isn't a significant boost to that funding compared to the 23-24 figure. There are reasons for that, which we'll outline in more detail. The total DSG allocation looks significantly higher at 316 million compared to 300 million. But the vast majority of that additional income is made up of the additional investment in early years services as we extend provision to both 2-year-old and under 2-year-old provision from 24-25. So again, in very crude summary, we've got a table there on page 12 of the agenda pack. Other influences on the overall allocated figure, as I've said repeatedly to this meeting, the like it or not, education is very much a bums on seats business. It's predominantly driven by pupil numbers, and the continuing fall in overall pupil numbers for Northumberland is obviously a concern in relation to that. Between reception in mainstream education, between reception and year 11, there was a fall of 0.6%, 253 students in respect of that, or in financial terms, that equates to £1.1 million. I've got some slides which I'll just share again just to further illustrate this point, if you bear with me. Again, I think it's often said more generally about Northumberland having an ageing population. We have an ageing education population as well. The blue blocks represent primary students. The orange blocks represent secondary students. And as you can see, you know, it again represents that fall there of, you know, approaching 500 primary students, offset to an extent by, you know, a 230, roughly 223, it isn't, increase in secondary students, but obviously they're going to be within the system for a shorter length of time. That's also evident then if we look at it on a year-by-year basis. It isn't a direct comparison because we've included special school numbers in here as well, because we don't have the year-by-year breakdown in the APT from the DSG specifically. But again, as you can see, our numbers do increase as students get older.
Bruce, sorry, Bruce, if we're supposed to be looking at a slide, it's not come through.
Not come through. Apologies. Thanks for that. You haven't seen any of the slides to date?
None.
No, I thought it was just me, but we see it's everyone.
Okay, sorry, just bear with me. I'll share that one.
Yeah, that's it now, Bruce. We can see it.
Okay, great. From the beginning. Right. That you can see that now? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry. So again, you've had the narrative, so I'll not dwell too much longer on that slide. Essentially, you know, we've got a fall of some 470 in the primary age population. That's over the 1 year, offset to an extent by a 223 increase in the secondary population, but that's got implications going forward because they're going to be in the system by default for a shorter length of time. That's also demonstrated when we look at it on a year-by-year basis between reception and year 11. Again, blue represents 23-24, orange represents 24-25. This includes special maintained and academy special schools within Northumberland as well, to get an overall view, because we know those numbers are increasing. But nevertheless, we still have more pupils. We have an older population. We have an older education population as well. We traditionally think of education at the primary secondary split. I just reworked this a little bit just to demonstrate if we look at it in terms of 2 equal year groups of 6. So I did a cut-off line at year 6 at year 5 rather than year 6, which is the traditional boundary. So we've got 6 year groups in each basket, if you like. And again, we can see that the older age group represents 51.7% of the population, up from 51.2% from the year before. And correspondingly, you've got a 0.5% fall in those in the reception to year 5 figures. So again, they're, you know, between reception to year 5 and year 6 to year 11, there are 1,370 students more in the older tranche. Again, free school meal numbers and deprivation remains a factor, and we've received a 3.95% overall increase in free school meal numbers, again, which will drive up the corresponding factors both within the formula, free school meals and Forever 6, but also obviously pupil premium as well. Again, we're seeing more of that in the secondary age group. One quick slide I wanted to show as well, it was in relation to changes in the high needs block, just for a number of reasons, just to, extending some of the detail in that initial table in the report. The top line is before all deductions, so we can see it's a 4.68 increase overall. That must be compared with increases of around 8 to 10% over the past 2 or 3 years, which is obviously extremely challenging, particularly in the context of the increasing plan numbers and the papers we had to the November meeting. we're doing all we can to mitigate that. You will see that the import-export deduction, we have successfully challenged some of the SF data on occasions and worked to reduce the number of out-of-county students, and we have managed to reduce that by £285,000. Allied to that, of course, the place funding that's automatically deducted for the specialist placements, we're seeing a substantial increase in that this year. That's predominantly with the opening and increase at the Gilbert Ward Academy, which obviously delivering some desperately needed places there. So in practice, that leaves us, after the deductions, a figure of 50.4 million for the 24-25 year compared to 48.2, 48.3. Again, roughly a 4.4% increase. So you can see why those discussions in relation to the high needs spending, high needs budget are crucial at this point in time. Okay, if you bear with me while I come out of that. Okay, let's pause briefly. Any questions, any observations at that point? Okay. In terms of the consultation with schools, first and foremost, thank you to everybody for their encouragement, for both their participation and their encouragement for schools to return the consultation before Christmas. We had 31 schools respond, which was far in excess of the usual numbers we get of between 8 and 10%. Obviously, there was a large number of questions looking at SEN, but for the purposes of today's meeting, I've extracted those which were specifically relevant to the setting of the DSG, so we'll pick those up. You'll remember that before Christmas, the forum supported a decision to transfer up to 0.5%, approximately 1.13 million from the schools block to the high needs block to address the escalating number of plans. Encouraging that our schools appreciate the pressures that arise from that, and we're again very supportive of that in terms of the overall numbers, 27 out of the 31 schools. So that was really encouraging. We also asked about the potential for a larger transfer in the future, and again, that was supported by the majority of schools, as shown in that graph there. It was essentially 20 out of the 31, with 6 don't knows and 5 opposing that. You will remember that the MFG, the minimum funding guarantee, essentially sets the minimum uplift per pupil for schools for next year. The ESFA criteria, thanks. I'll go back to the report as well now. Sorry, the ESFA criteria mean that we can set that at a maximum of 0.5%. That's what we've traditionally tried to do for Northumberland schools, and again, that was supported in the consultation responses. 28 out of the 31 schools supported that approach. Again, important for this year as well was that we're still a significant majority in favour of the use of capping and scaling as required, 22 versus 9. That's been an important factor in enabling the council to increase the transfer from 0.25%, which was taken for the current year, to 0.5% for this year. That's been funded in practice through the increased use of capping and scaling. Capping and scaling, again, that what it does is we've set a cap at 2.13%. So in practice, any formula gains over 2.13% per pupil, which would be driven by additional deprivation numbers, for instance, it's 75% of that is then retained by the council, and that's been used to fund the transfer to the high needs block this year. Apologies, everyone. Technical difficulties this morning. Thanks, Andrea. Is that report showing now? Can somebody just confirm that?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. It's important that we, again, spend some time looking at the early years block this year. The total funding has increased significantly because of the extension of the early years offer, and that's got direct implications for how we set our rates. Northumberland has historically attempted to pass through more than the 95% in relation to this, and we've used additional funding to increase the rates by more than the national increase. And again, we've considered all of that when we were looking to set rates for 24-25. There's obviously still a great degree of uncertainty around you know, sort of future demand, future funding in relation to that. We have had various meetings with the ESFA in relation to how the funding will be set for next year, and have considered all that when we're looking to set the rates for 24-25. It's important at this point that we gain an early decision. We make an early decision on the setting of the rates as set out in the table there, to communicate that to our early years providers, both those schools with community nursery provision and the PVI providers, so they can start to make financial plans for the forthcoming financial year. So that's the rates we're proposing for 24-25, showing the level of increases where possible. And again, the basic principles we've adopted there is passing on the maximum funding to support all providers equally, maintaining a 2-year-old base rate, passing on the Disability Access Fund uplift, and maintaining the pupil premium plus rates, which we use in terms of the deprivation premium for Northumberland. We've worked with corporate finance, with Abby and a team, to agree these rates. So essentially, we're looking for Schools Forum to note the following in terms of the rates, as outlined both in the bold there and the blocks and the table outlined above. Is there any specific questions in relation to that? Okay.
David's got his hand raised. David?
Yeah, thanks, Alan. Thanks, Bruce. Yeah, just a quick comment really on this. There's a lot of different ways in which the different rates can be cut. It is a really complex set of systems that we've been handed, really. I think Bruce probably did summarise quite well in terms of the key principles that we're attempting to pass on, as much as the funding directly to the providers, which is an obvious thing to do, but also something slightly tricky to do. The variances come around the fact that we do give an allocation for deprivation, which is a requirement within the formula, but we've got to decide and set that ourselves, and to which age ranges that additional pupil premium will be allocated, again, is a factor which has some variance in it. There is a top slice which supports some of the central teams, the early years team in particular. You've got to think some of the people who are delivering our early years provision, often in a very excellent way, but are often sort of one-person bands, single childminders, etc. And they do need a central support team to ensure that the quality is high and that they've got the appropriate safeguarding, etc. in place. So it is important. But again, to note that actually, I think last year's top slice was about 4.5% of the overall budget, whereas this year it's going to be closer to 3% of the overall budget, again indicating that more of the money is being passed through. All of the rates are either been maintained or most have gone up for the vast majority of providers. And where a rate hasn't increased, it's because there's some of the rate, what we might have used as an overall universal increase, has actually been used to increase deprivation or to fund a deprivation payment. So actually the headline figure for some of these will be higher because some of the learners will be eligible for the pupil premium and the pupil premium plus, which has gone up accordingly. Overall, it will, as ever, create some with any change, create some thoughts across the early years sector. But I do think this is a good offer, and when providers look at what will be available for them, they should find, depending on their ratios, etc., that they're able to at least maintain their current provisions at a time when we need them to extend them as well, and hopefully they'll see benefit in extending them.
Thanks, David. I think it's important to add as well, from the perspective of a provider, that the central early years team do a really important job in strategic planning and supporting providers bid for what capital might be available. So I think, you know, the top slice to them continues absolutely essential. And I'll, you know, as you know, involved with a trust which does have extensive early years provision, I completely support the continuation of top slicing for the central team.
Thanks, Alan. I'll pass that on to the team. They'll appreciate that comment.
Are there any other specific comments in relation to that early years aspect? Kath, I'm conscious you're on the meeting, and you will know more about this probably any us here. I think, again, looking for that early confirmation of the rate is important to you as a provider.
Yes, I mean, it's the fact that the rates have gone up is really beneficial to everybody. I think the only complicating factor is because pay has gone up and then everything else is going up, the number of fee paying children will drop, and it's the fee paying children who bring in a lot of the funding to PVIs. And there's going to be a reduction in those fee-paying children, which means there's going to be a reduction in intake financially. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I understand that.
It's a good point, Kath, and I appreciate that. Is one of the nubs of the challenge for what's going to occur. When 30 hours came in, of course, that was a very similar concern at that point in time, that the 30 hours would take away some of the privately funded places to be replaced by publicly funded places, and that the public funding might not cover it. I think probably mainly through the excellent work of the sector themselves, we did manage to overcome that with the 30 hours in most cases. I think this will need a continuing watching brief as well to ensure that we don't lose any providers through to if the funding rates don't equate to the costs of delivering the service.
Okay, Mike Dean Hall's got his hand raised. Mike.
Thank you. Yeah, it's just chipping in and having a nursery as well with the previous comments from yourself, Alan, and Kath as well, agreeing with those, but also the changing eligibility. So that's widening and opening, which means potentially opening to more children puts different pressures on space and place, as well as staff and funding. So there's maybe an issue to do with buildings capacities as well, and settings that both PVIs and county-led or school-based ability to meet the demand that is coming. I don't know whether other folks on the forum have got nurseries like we have, whereby we've seen a particular spike in 2-year-old requests, and struggling to be able to meet the 2-year-old needs in terms of setting and people. So there's a mix of change of availability, change of funding, change of expectation, which I think is something that will be tricky to work through over the next sort of 12 to 18 months.
Okay, yeah, a fair point, Mike. I think important to consider how we might expand capacity, which I'm sure we'll hear further details on if any capital becomes available for that.
Yeah, there is, as you'd expect, a plan in across the team. Sufficiency of places is a statutory function of the council, so it's obviously is a key focus for the team to work with yourselves to deliver the appropriate number of places in the right places. And it is that work of the calculations about where we predict the places will be. There's actually been quite a lot of support from the DfE in terms of planning tools, etc., to predict those numbers. And obviously, we need that feedback from the sandpit, as it were, directly back to us about where individual pressures are occurring. There is a small amount of capital funding that's coming through, and that will be targeted on the areas where provision might not match what the expected demand is.
Okay, is any other queries or comments in relation to the section 5 in terms of the early years DSG settlement? Again, a reminder that the early years figure particularly is a movable feast based on sort of January census numbers on an annual basis, and it will be revised accordingly. Okay, if we move on to high needs. As I outlined previously, we're looking at a lesser increase in the high needs block funding this year than we've been used to in previous years. We've talked about the the work we've done around reducing the import-export adjustments. We're still looking at the implications of this in terms of the high needs budget settlement, and as in previous years, we'll bring the detailed breakdown of that budget to the 14th of February meeting, together with additional information on those questions that related to the high needs block and SEN pressures as part of the school funding consultation that went out in December. Obviously, we need to set the overall block at this point to enable the APT to be submitted by the deadline of the 22nd of January, not the 22nd of February. Apologies for that error in the report. We need to get the school offers out by the end of February for in relation to the schools block funding. Okay. And again, schools block. Again, we've spent some time looking at this already. The detail of the funding breakdown across both schools block and all of the other blocks is set out in a detailed appendix at Annex 1. Northumberland is proposing to continue to use national funding formula values for 24-25 as we did in 23-24. But this is only possible through the allocation and use of the growth fund element within the 24-25 settlement, which is allocated to the council in order to fund any required growth on a year-to-year basis, and also through the application of capping and scaling measures. We've had to introduce capping and scaling in order to meet the increased transfer from the schools block to the high needs block this year. You will recall that for the current year we only took 0.25%. MFG has again been set in line with schools consultation responses at 0.5%. And we made a disapplication request to the ESFA in relation to the reorganisation in the COGIT partnership. I'm pleased to report that this has now been approved by the ESFA. That involves obviously the retention of funding for year 5 pupils by the current first schools with effect from September 2024. To reflect the fact that they will retain their year 5 students. It was an uncontentious request and was duly approved. Okay. In relation to the schools forum report, obviously the final decision power was delegated to Audrey in her role as Executive Director of Children, Young People and Education, and also Guyana Thompson as the Cabinet Member for Inspiring Young People around the setting of the final formula values. But again, we anticipate as we work to the submission of the final APT that they will be in line with the figures within the report set out in the table, which we'll go to below. Just go to that table now. Again, dealing with the specific formula factors, we've hashtagged the ARPU lump sum and deprivation sort of formula factors, because on the face of it, they look as if they've had a relatively generous increase, but that's influenced by the inclusion, as I've noted on the bottom of the table, the inclusion of the mainstream school additional grant elements, which overinflates those factors as such. Otherwise, you can see that there is generally that a lower level of increase for the current financial year. Sorry, for the next financial year, starting April 2024. Again, hopefully that's you spent at the school. And again, that's the capping and scaling elements we've been forced to introduce this year to fund the additional transfer to the high needs block. Okay. I'll stop briefly for any comments or observations in relation to the schools block funding. Graham's got a hand up.
Thanks, Bruce. Yeah, it's just a query, an aspect I didn't fully understand, which was around the fact that the funding values, the formula values could be met through the transfer of the 0.5%, but that also required use of the growth fund and the capping and scaling. I think I understood the capping and scaling implications into why they were needed, but it was really to understand what the implications of this requirement to use the growth fund that had been allocated to the council, and that was what was behind being able to meet the formula values. Are there longer term implications around that as to whether that is sustainable into the long term?
It's an observation I've made to the ESFA, particularly when they publish some notional figures which don't reflect those pressures, Graham. That together with a number of North East councils, and it was a discussion I was having with fellow North East schools finance representatives yesterday, the only way we can meet national funding formulas currently is through topping up, if you like, through that central council pot, which should otherwise sit within the central council DSG to use for growth funding, like when we used for the bulge classes earlier this year at CLV and St Bernard Bishops accordingly. The problem we have is that in terms of the way the funding works on a national basis, and it's obviously one of the laments of Formula 40, is that although they're introducing the national funding formula, the protection in the system overall still means that we're not fully funded, and that other authorities still receive, more funding per pupil, more funding, and it's not just based on the current formula, it's a legacy of the previous formulas because of the way MFG builds in those historic elements. We've lobbied, we have raised this with the ESFA and pointed out the innate unfairness of this, which I've received a bit of a dismissive shrug, which I was really disappointed about, frankly. So yes, so it's a harsh financial fact of life at the moment. That's the only way. It was important that we point out the fact that that's the only way we could fund the full formula, the full national formula factors, is through cross-subsidising it, if you like, to an extent. We're able to do that currently, but that's not necessarily always the case. Always going to be the case.
No, and is that aspect quite low prominence within the F40, because they've done a bit of work clearly around high needs, and that's got much more profile. I just wonder, are they likely to have any traction on this particular aspect, would you say?
I think it's the SEN high needs that's attracting a lot of the attention at the moment, and it, again, to an extent, the standard schools funding is taking a little bit of a backseat, but it is there in some of the materials around the the funding per head of the school funding per head of members within the Formula 40 groups compared to the the other LEA local authorities in England. Ironically, I was looking at some initial figures yesterday, and local and Northumberland, as it stands, is probably is the second best funded Formula 40 authority, but that still leaves us sort of towards the very mid-table at best.
Just
about 80th.
A final question, Bruce, related to that. If the money's coming from what would otherwise be used for a growth fund and dealing with contingencies therein, is there a problem down the line if there's a need for that money, but it's been allocated elsewhere?
Well, that's why we retain some schools block contingency, Graham. But
right.
There's potentially a problem down the line as the ESFA. We've taken the decision to semi-ring fence, if you like, to look at each of the 4 elements of the schools block on their own merits. It's very much an ESFA view that it's one schools block overall, and then actually the danger relating to that, of course, is that the high needs block just sort of sort of devour that within a year, which again focuses a lot of attention around looking at the high needs and high needs pressures, Graham.
Yeah, that's very helpful.
I think we need to continue to make that point through Formula 40 indirectly about the fact that there's an unfairness, the fact that we need to use this growth element. But it's because of the length, as something Formula 40 said about the length of time in unwinding the other elements has got a knock-on effect nationally across the country, in terms of while everybody levels up because of the protections built into the system.
Okay, thanks very much.
Okay, no problem. Thanks, Graham. Okay. We'll then, again, unless there are any other questions, I'll move on and look at the de-delegated aspect. This is important, particularly for the maintained school members. All members will be aware, I'm sure, that de-delegation is permitted through the schools and early finance regulations, and it's a standard way of funding some of the core services required by the council. Northumberland hasn't increased the rates per unit for de-delegation for 5 years now, mindful of pressures on schools. We have reduced to 4 de-delegated services as outlined in the table there. That's outlined in terms of their impact in both 23-24 and 24-25. There has been an increasing focus over the last 12 months, obviously, around EAL services specifically, with the influx of students from Ukraine, and I know there's increasing demands on that service. When we finish this report, we'll take that we look for the specific agreement of our maintained members in relation to the de-delegated rates proposed for 24-25. But I'm happy to take any specific questions either from maintained school members or more generally in relation to de-delegations now. Okay. Central School Services Block, Schools Forum have been aware for a number of years. This is made up of 2 elements. It is essentially, we've highlighted historically the cash element, which was used for historic commitments such as capital loan funding and also previous pension commitments. As there has been a concerted effort by the ESFA to unwind that, and there has been a 20% reduction year on year. So essentially, that has been built into our figures. However, obviously our commitments unwind as well, so that continues to meet those pressures. We have seen a smaller increase in the element for ongoing statutory responsibilities. And again, as with the high needs block, we'll bring more specific details on how we're proposing to use that £2.1 million to the February Schools Forum meeting. Okay. Annex 1 there has a lot of information in it in relation to the 4 funding streams and how that's being used. And again, I'm not going to go through that. It's there for reference if anybody has any questions or is looking to reconcile back. I think at this point we'll come back to the report recommendations, if we may, Chair.
Yes, great, Bruce.
So again, specifically, Schools Forum members are being asked to note the report and the information provided in the context of the overall 24-25 DSG across the 4 blocks. We'll provide more detailed specific budgets to the 14th of February meeting, Valentine's Day. It's not been lost on a number of members present. Specifically, can we seek the approval from our maintained school members present, which will be Adele, which will be Mike Dean Hall. I don't think Nicola Brannan is with us, unfortunately, or Neil Rogers, in relation to the proposals for delegation for 24-25.
Yes, from me, it's Mike.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Mike.
I missed the first part of the meeting, but I've read the stuff, so yeah, that's fine.
Okay, thank you. So that's agreed. Okay. Unless there are any comments or observations, that concludes agenda item 6, the main report. Okay.
Thank you, Bruce, and thanks for your comprehensive slides to support that as well and help us understand something at times is pretty tricky to comprehend if you're not an expert on school funding. So thank you for that.
Sure.
Okay, so the next item is the work programme and the remaining meeting dates.
Okay. Just important there, we've just picked up that, sorry, my apologies, that Amy from James Calvert Spence is attending on behalf of Neil Rogers, and she's also supported the proposal for delegation. Appreciate it. Thanks, Amy. Good to see you. The meeting, again, the meetings and dates for the rest of 2024 are in the agenda pack. Not proposing any changes to those. Just highlighting, of course, that as last year, when it seemed to go down quite well, we will be proposing a face-to-face meeting on the 17th of July in County Hall, the final meeting of the academic year. So please, obviously, note that accordingly.
Thanks, Bruce. David Street.
Hi, sorry, I'm not sure if this is an appropriate slot, but just in terms of work streams, etc. I was going to request, it's probably going to hang on for any other business, but it probably fits now. The high needs block subcommittee meeting group, I was just wondering whether there was the possibility or an appetite to have some discussions in and around the high needs block, not for any decision making, but maybe some possible option appraisals or a start of some option appraisals before the February meeting. It is a short time scale, but again, I think it just I do see Schools Forum as a really good sounding board and folk who are delivering on a daily basis. So it would be good to get opinions, and then I think beyond that, possibly some recommendations to take any proposals out into the field with more generally to schools, probably in a variety of different places across the county, to get as much feedback on possible steps for the high needs block.
Chair, I'm available on the 7th if you want to meet him for high needs.
So I think if there's an interest in that, then we can circulate we'll draft a provisional agenda for it and circulate it to everyone, because obviously everyone can attend the high needs meeting. You don't have to be a regular attender, and actually the last meeting we had was probably the best attended there's been. So if you're okay to chair that, Graham, I think that would probably be a good use of the high needs group's time.
I'm more than happy to liaise with Graham to get that set up if that's okay.
Yeah, I mean the 7th I'm free all day, so obviously there if everybody else, yeah. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Anyone else have any comments on that suggestion?
I'm perfectly happy to attend. I think it would be a good idea. It's just going to be getting a date in before that is going to be quite tight. Schools are very busy this half term. But yeah, if we can get an email invite out sharpish, then I'll try my best to attend.
Yeah, we can try and get something sorted today, Adele. Yeah,
Brilliant.
get the information out. Thank you.
Sorry, David, I don't know if you said this, but I was dealing with a lack of heating somewhere at the minute, so I was just fiddling on in the background. So apologies. Did you suggest that that would be a face-to-face meeting so that we can do it more as a workshop rather than?
I think it would be great to do it face to face. It's just against that capacity for folk to attend. A hybrid workshop of virtual and face to face. My experience is they're quite difficult to get the productivity out of. So maybe we could try and workshop virtually, and see what comes. And again, I think this is probably just going to be just a step. In terms of trying to find some palatable solutions, or some solutions that will be as palatable as possible to the pressures on the high needs block. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. So we're now at any other business. I haven't been given anything in advance, but is there any other business that anyone wishes to raise at the moment? Okay, well, thank you very much, everyone. We'll get the information out about the additional high needs group meeting as soon as possible. And then the next meeting, as we've said, is on the 14th of February. So thank you very much, everyone, for your participation.